Hey, good. I think we're morning still, 11:11 a.m. Make a wish. Good morning, everybody. This is Andrew Cooperrider doing a live for you guys here. You're going to see me doing more of them, of course, as we get into the legislative session, so I can kind of keep you up to date on what's going on and what to expect. If you could, please, though, do me a favor. Go ahead and hit the share button. If you're on Facebook watching this live or on replay, hit the share button. Also, as well, if you are on YouTube, hit the like, hit subscribe, share the link with individuals. We do appreciate that as well. This is also available as a podcast form. So if you're watching this on replay and you're like, hey, I want to listen to what Andrew has to say, but I'm on the go, you can go to our podcast called Fresh Brewed Politics. It is on Spotify and Apple and all the places where you go ahead and see those kinds of things. So please feel free, go ahead and hit the share button, because I'm going to be breaking down a couple of bills, or of course what to expect this year to pass, and just kind of breaking that down for everybody. So please share it out, let people know, and let's get into it. So what should we be expecting this year? So I've broken it down in three categories. What is most likely going to get done? Now, nothing's 100% guaranteed. So as I say things, and if they turn out to not get through, don't yell at me. And what might get done, and what has been filed should be done, or maybe shouldn't be done. But what has been filed that will be the fight. What has been filed that will take a couple of years to pass? It'll be a constant struggle fight. What has been filed that we need to fight on, or will be filed that we need to fight on? And what should we just expect to easily get passed this year? That's going to pass no matter kind of what we do about it. So I'm going to break those down. So once again, please hit the share button. And as always, you can go to andrew4ky.com. That's my campaign page. You can donate to the campaign. You can go to merch there. There's a shop on there, and let's get into it. So my friend Thomas Massey once said, whenever you want to know what are the bills that most likely will pass, but are the absolute worst, especially when it comes to, the establishment or what have you, you look at BR 1 through 10. And so far this year, what we have posted is BR 6. And this isn't on anybody's radar, so I just wanted to talk about what it is. And let me tell you, it is, of course, the biggest, one of those latent, obviously, clearly establishment Republican type bills, where they've departed from the very creation of this departs from the Republican Party platform. Remember, we have a super majority of Republicans in our state legislature. We've 75 House seats, and we have 21 Senate seats. Okay, so we can overcome any veto. We have a majority by a long shot, and that will only continue to grow this year too as well. I mean, I think in the Senate, we've got a retirement there out of E-Town. I can't remember his name, but anyways, we got a retirement out of E-Town that might be picked up now by a Republican. And then there is a Senate seat up that I believe was picked up on a special election a few years ago that's currently held by Democrats. So that will increase. I think the House, you'll see a couple of increases too as well, as we've seen across the bat. So we're probably going to be looking at close to 77 Republicans in the House. And if I had to guess, 33 Republicans in the Senate after 2022. And we are still dealing with situations like this. And so we're going to look at BR 6. Remember, BR 1 through 10, most likely bills to see some movement on. They're the bills that have been in the works or generally leadership wants done. And looking at BR 6, it's definitely one of those bills. What BR 6 would do is it would create a tax expenditure and economic development incentive review board. I'm going to say that again. The Tax Expenditure and Economic Development Incentive Review Board. There's a funny tag group out there that one of my friends created that is, I don't know, that sounds like some rhino BS to me. And let me tell you, it does. That is what that sounds like to me. And let me break down why. Very simply, the Republican Party platform states that Republicans do not believe government creates economic opportunity. It can only stifle it. That is in our platform. It is right there. Okay. So we have that in our platform. And then also, as well, in our platform, we have lines that say government shouldn't be picking and choosing winners and losers. That's in the Republican Party platform. Additionally, as well, it says we don't believe in corporate welfare. These are all three things that are in the Republican Party platform that we state we care about. But yet, when you look at a bill like BR6, that is a literal board to create economic development incentive, please tell me how that does not violate our platform. But of course, this is the type of thing that will pass. Why will it pass? Well, because it's a board. Let me tell you how this board's formed. It's comprised of 12 people. Okay. 4 of them are picked by the president of the Senate, okay, who shall serve while a member of the Senate for the term for which he or she has been elected. So, of course, the president of each of whom will serve. So the president of the Senate gets to pick 4, okay, one of which shall be the chair or vice chair, okay, of the Senate Standing Committee on Appropriations Revenue, A&R, and one of whom the president of the Senate shall designate as co-chair of the board. 4 members of the General Assembly appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Okay, so this is once again, okay, this is a review board. Okay, 4 members of General Assembly, right, appointed by the Senate. So once again, currying favor. 4 members of the House of Representatives picked by the Speaker. Okay, one of whom shall be the chair or vice chair of the House Standing Committee on Appropriations and Revenue, and one of whom the Speaker shall designate as co-chair of the board, of course. And 2 members of the General Assembly appointed by the minority floor leader, and 2 members appointed in the Senate and minority floor leader on the House of Representatives. Okay, so basically this is forming another committee that is specifically looking at a development incentive review board. Okay, so what does that mean? It means taking a look at your tax dollars and deciding and looking over how the corporate welfare will be handed out on your tax dollars. Now, once again, the party platform is pretty clear. We don't believe in corporate welfare. So unless they're literally saying no, no, and no, and you're forming a board to just say no because you're following your platform, what this is it sounds a lot like giving out special economic favors to those who donate high numbers, or another way to basically slush fund taxpayer dollars into the pockets of corporations that then slush fund that money back to the elected representatives. So, of course, 1, they win re-election, so they keep doing it. And then 2 as well, so that way they can enrich themselves, of course. And that's the way, hey, look, that's the way it looks to me. If they can make a compelling argument why we need another board to just hand out your tax dollars that is appointed by and is controlled by the establishment, you let me know what that reason is. But I can't think of one, and that's BR6. So, of course, like I said, those BR 1 through 10, as Thomas Massey once said, those are the bills you want to look out for. And most of the time, you're going to want to vote no on them. So, so what else will get done? Most likely, we're going to see a voting law come down. Now, last year, we had 2 voting laws. One that required paper ballots, which, hold on, my bad. Remember, guys, be sharing this out too as well. Hit the share button. Share it to a couple pages. Next, so one will be voting law change for machines and internet to not be connected. So last year, we had a couple of voting bills. One was a requirement to be on a paper ballot, which passed. And the other was to say that vote counting machines cannot be connected to the internet. Now, the way that bill was wrote, it was supposedly wrote in such a way that it said the machines cannot have the ability to be connected to the internet, not just not connected to the internet. So what happened is the bill did not connect it to the internet. It passed. The Senate House went to the Beshear's desk for approval or veto. Beshear says that's the Secretary of State, Michael Adams, and asked him to veto it. But when the Secretary of State's office, I'd asked them about that and why they vetoed it. They said they didn't ask him to veto it. But I don't know. They might be lying. I don't know. Somebody's lying. That's the point. Somebody's lying. But anyways, and the reasoning why is because apparently all these voting machines across Kentucky can be connected to the internet. And the bill was wrote in such a way that it made it so those machines that can connect to the internet would have to be thrown out and they'd have to be gotten rid of. And so the clerk's office and everybody else said, hey, we can't be throwing out all these voting machines. It's too expensive. We don't have it in our budgets, everything else. So this year we're going to see a bill that says legally they cannot be connected to the internet. And so what this is going to come down to enforce this law is it's going to come down to you, the citizens, signing up to be poll watchers and vote count watchers to make sure that that law is being followed. And when it's not, reaching out. And there's some wonderful organizations, Americans for Election Integrity, KY, that are doing some trainings on this. They'll have lawyers on call the day of election. So that should get handed down. And that should pass this year. And a lot of people ask me, look, are we going to have trouble getting voting reform laws passed? No, we won't. And here's why. If you're a Republican, you fall into one of two camps. Either A, once again, we're Republican supermajority, so we don't have to worry about what the Democrats think. 1A, you either have Republicans that believe that the election was stolen, or B, you got Republicans that believe the election wasn't stolen. That's the only two categories. But here's the problem. If you believe the elections are completely fair and free and everything else, well, then you got to worry about turnout. And so if you don't do something to make people feel safe and secure in their elections, you won't get the turnout. If you believe, of course, that the elections are being stolen, you want to fix it so that way you don't lose your election. So there's incentives on either side of this issue in the Republican Party, whether you got your Liz Cheney's or you've got your standard normal Republicans. They both have incentives in order to actually get some voting law changes done, just so in their own mind. So that will be. We will probably see a CRT bill. I don't know if BR 69 is the one. BR 69 does not say the word CRT, but bans the teaching that one race is superior to another race is the way that they put that in there, the way they mark that out. I think you'll see a CRT bill pass. What it's going to say exactly is going to be a little hard, because the hard part is of course you can't just say we're going to ban CRT, because these wily people, what they do is, and we've all seen it, what they do is they'll go on and they'll just start calling it something else. They'll just say, hey, what's the new one? SEL training, social and economic learning, or something like that they'll be called. And so what'll end up happening is they'll get around the bills that they're writing anyway. So what they have to do is you have to go ahead and just say, okay, here, we're going to write a bill that has some general terminology to it that allows people to kind of have a ability to feel their way through it, I guess you could say. And so they're going to probably roll out some sort of bill that has some sort of terminology in it about teaching one race superior to the other. How much teeth will be on that bill, I don't know. Because at the end of the day, too, if a teacher wants to teach it, they kind of are just going to teach it. And it's really hard to narrow that down and pick, okay, who's this actually going to end up targeting? Who's going to follow it? Teachers are going to teach what they want to teach. So that's what leads into, there's a bill, or not a bill, but something that should be done. There's a bill filed for it. And I'll talk about that here in a second, and what might be done. But you will see something on CRT, I'm sure of it. You will see a budget bill, of course. We've had a budget bill for the last 3 years. Every year, typically we pass a budget bill. This year's session is longer. Last year is 30 days. This year's session is twice as long. And so on the longer sessions, they typically pass a budget bill. We will see a budget bill pass this year. Of course, the A&R committees are what do that. A&R committees are made up of the establishment. They don't typically put on the people who are going to give pushback or actually have some discussion or actually have some sort of conservative spending ideas. No, they'll look at this not massive, but they'll look at this surplus we have and they'll be like, how can we spend that on some sort of other special project or something like that, instead of paying off our debts, making sure our pension program, maybe take this surplus of a couple of billion and fix our pension problem that we have, to permanently fix that going forward, so we can actually transition off a government-run pension program that is destined to be obsolete and lose I'm sorry, and go bankrupt. I mean, it's destined to. Maybe we take our surplus and take care of that, but crazy me. Anyways, and redistricting. So redistricting will be attempted to be done. So here's the constitutional requirement. They have 2 years from when they get the data to do redistricting. So if you were not trying to do some, once again, Rhino BS, what you would probably want to do when it comes to redistricting is wait until 23. Reason why is because you got a lot of elections coming up. The governor didn't call a special session, and these maps are going to come out. They'll probably need to be litigated. Somebody will file a lawsuit. It'll end up in the courts. They'll end up being litigated. It'll turn into a fight. It'll be a gigantic problem for the entire year. So what they should do if they weren't trying to take advantage of redistricting in order to try to take down some individuals they really don't want to see in the legislature, like myself, like Aaron Reed, it's harder in the House because the requirements. So in the Senate, you had to actually live in the district. In House districts, the way the Constitution's wrote, as I understand it, is you just had to live in the county, town that the district's located in. So you don't exactly have to live in the House district. So take like Lexington, for an example. I believe, if I'm understanding it, now this typically isn't done. And also the way federal congressmen are this way too. You just have to live in the state. You don't have to actually live in the congressional district. But as I understand it, so like Lexington has like 4 or 5, I think, House districts. Louisville's tons in their city there, and so anybody in that city can run for any of those House seats. I don't believe you actually had to live in the district, though. Of course, if you don't live in the district, that's an attack ad that writes itself. So that's why typically you should live in the district, but the Senate, you have to actually live in the district. So they're going to target, of course, some state senators. I'm sure, you'll see them trying to play around with probably the 12th district because it's an open seat and I'm running in it and they hate me and I'm a threat. And then you'll also see people, maybe even Aaron Reed up there in Shelbyville. They're going to try to play with that a little bit. And so the reason why they're trying to do it now is because redistricting and having a shorter election cycle, the shorter the election cycle, because remember, if you don't know where your district is, you don't know where to campaign at. And so by having a shorter election cycle, what it ends up doing is it favors those people, the establishment people. So the thing that they should do is they should wait till 23 after this election into the 23 regular session. They should do redistricting, and that way it can be fully litigated before the maps would take effect for their first time being run through, which would be in 24. Because remember, in 23, we just had the constitutional offices. Those are statewide. We don't have any House races or Senate races that happen in 23. So that would be the best time to do it. And it's constitutional. You got 2 years from the time you get the data. That's not what they're going to do. What they're going to do is they're going to come into session. Then the first couple of days, they're going to have a vote to move back the voting deadline. Now, the filing deadline. Now, the filing deadline used to be at the end of January. Anyways, they moved it earlier to January 6th this year because of the fact that this is going to make you laugh. When the filing deadline was later, what it meant was they were afraid to do anything their first 30 days of that they were in office, or in January. They're afraid to have any votes or do anything in committees or anything because they're afraid of drawing out opponents. And so they moved the filing deadline sooner. So that way, if they were doing bad things during that session, they could get away with it without having to face trouble at the ballot box. I'm dead serious. That's why they moved it. Anyway, so they moved it forward. Now they're going to move it. Supposedly have a vote to move it back again, just in order to be able to pass these maps. And these maps, are they going to move the deadline far back enough that these maps can then be litigated so people know what districts they're going to be? Who knows? But they're going to try redistricting. Honestly, if you're asking me, I put it at a 50-50 shot the maps take effect this year because, let's look. So 10 years ago, maps were filed. Now, they were blatantly unconstitutional. And there was a couple of filings, but where they were actually filed at was in Frankfurt with Judge Shepard. And, he held up, he did, I believe, put the injunction in place, and it was held up on those maps. So those maps didn't take, those maps actually got knocked down for being unconstitutional. And they end up redistricting 2 years later in 2012 is when the districts took effect. And so, but they were not they were blatantly unconstitutional. So if they come out and they seem constitutional and there's no unconstitutional lawsuits, they're just bad maps, gerrymandered maps. Gerrymandering isn't actually unconstitutional. So if that's the case, the maps may still hold up. However, we know Shepard's a political hack. He's definitely in the pocket with the Democrats. He legislates from the bench. We've seen that this year. I mean, he just got shellacked by the state Supreme Court for being an obvious political hack. So we'll see what he does. But what will most likely happen is, especially if the Democrats are going to be the ones filing it, Judge Shepard may injunctify the maps, and we're running on the old maps. I think I give 50-50 that the new redistricting maps even take effect this year. And then the word is too going on in the House with redistricting. There might be a couple of sitting House members that end up having to run against each other because they end up getting districted into weird maps or weird ways. And so they may end up getting districted to where they got to run against each other. We will see what happens there. I am unsure on what will happen with redistricting. That's just kind of one of those things where there's no crystal ball. Just kind of got to wait and see. And anybody sitting there telling you this is definitely what's going to happen with the maps is lying to you. They have no clue. They'll know what the maps that they're making will look like, but they have no clue whether or not those maps are going to go ahead and go through. Before we move into what might get done that we will either need to fight for or against, please, guys, hit the share button. As well, you can also go to andrew4ky.com. You can donate. You pick up one of these cool hoodies. The government is too darn big. Cooper for Kentucky. That's right. And you can go ahead and do that. But please hit the share button and let's go into what might get done. Some of it's more of a long shot than others, but we're going to have to fight like crazy. So first off, one thing to understand is, generally speaking, you're going to look at, if you're wondering, who's the person on the other side of these issues. So the first issue is a gas tax reformation or a change. And if you're wondering who's the other person on the other side of these issues, most of the time it's our Kentucky State Chamber of Commerce. That is most of the time who we're ending up against. The State Chamber of Commerce is generally owned and controlled by giant corporations. It's one of the biggest, it is the biggest lobbying force in Kentucky, and it really controls a lot of what's going on in the legislature. And so what you end up with is, most of the time when we're talking about things that are not for the people, we're up against them. Because let's remember, these giant corporations, so let's take the first thing, a gas tax, what do they call it? Restructuring, right? So here's the deal. Gas tax they want to look at because for a couple of reasons. And what sucks is they got a little bit of an argument here. The problem is the minute you start talking about gas tax needing to increase the amount of money going into government, you lose me. And you lose me simply because of the fact that I believe that until we can sit there and say the government isn't wasting $1, we shouldn't be increasing the tax money, no matter who it's coming from. But if we're looking at it just with the road fund, let's say, and if we actually can say that there's extra money elsewhere, I see their argument as far as saying, look, we've got electric vehicles. So our roads are paid for through a gas tax. That gas tax is based upon gallons, and it's a tax amount per gallon. And so essentially what they're saying is, these hybrids are getting 50 miles to the gallon, or these electric vehicles that aren't buying any gas at all. Look, they're driving on our roads and they're not paying anything in gas tax, while somebody like that's driving a 20 mile per gallon SUV is paying a lot more for the same road, and generally speaking is creating the same wear and tear on the roads. And so what they're saying is that, look, we need to change this up. Instead of it being a percentage or an amount, or we need to put a tax on electric and hybrid vehicles to make up for what we're losing in the gas tax. And I hear all that. The thing is, this last year when we were fighting it and ended up getting it stopped in its tracks, what they were trying to do was increase the gas tax 40% for everybody, like right off the bat, and then only tax electric vehicles like $100. And so once again, do I think quote unquote electric vehicles should be paying their fair share into the road fund, and I'm putting that in quotations, their fair share into the road fund to pay for paving the roads? Yes, I do. However, I also believe the government spends way too much money in general, has way too much coming in, and I don't believe in giving the government another dime. And so it's a little bit of a quagmire. But of course, the giant corporations controlling the Kentucky State Chamber of Commerce, they want that kind of thing passed because it's good for the corporations. Look, we've got nicer roads and better infrastructure. And oh, look, these giant paving companies and everything else, they're wetting their beak. They're getting more of this government contracts to pave roads and everything else. And then that helps all these other corporations out. And meanwhile, you, the taxpayer, is paying for it, but the corporations, yes, they're paying for it too. But he's saying, look, if I'm the CEO of a giant company, look, I would rather pay an extra $200 a year that we're all paying to drive on these roads and then get millions more in profit from the paving and everything else than if I wasn't paying it. So yeah, I'm willing to tax everybody in order to help us out. And that's where the Chamber of Commerce comes in, and that's why you see this push on the other side. So we got a gas tax change or reformation. Look, it can't happen. We've got to say enough is enough. The government has too darn money. They don't get another red penny. And at the end of the day, they look at it and they love to hit you with, well, how do you think we fund the roads? I mean, look, that's a road fund. It can only be spent on the roads. How do you want to fund our roads? And this is what you hit them with. You hit them right back with it. You say, Representative, I believe he's retiring, Duplessis, whatever. He proposed a gas tax reformation that wasn't going to raise it 40% right off the back, would have raised it less, but he did propose it. And I was talking to him and I said, look, you can't be doing that. And he said, well, it's a usage tax. I said, I generally support usage tax or sales taxes versus an income tax, and we've got to pay for the roads. How would you suggest we fund it? I go, look right there. You see, you just forgot something. See, you're looking at, you got the general fund, the Sikh fund, you got the tobacco settlement money, you got the whatever funds, right? You got all these different funds out there. And you keep forgetting it comes from one place, the taxpayer's pocket. And it's all coming from that one place. And until we go ahead and we take care of that, we're going to have to say, hey, no more tax increases. Get your house in order. We're not going to put good money after bad. Get your house in order. I don't care what reasoning you give us. So we're going to have to fight on that gas tax increase. That's going to come down. And I hope a lot of you guys will stand with us as soon as we kind of get that done. Like I said, they tried it last year. They're going to try to sneak it in on some amendments on some things. They'll use some trickery to try to get something done. And so you just got to keep your eyes on it. And of course, we're going to do the best we can to keep you guys informed going through this legislative session. Next thing, what should be done we need to maybe push a little bit is site-based council change. So for those who are unaware, these public schools, they have a site-based council. Right now, it's two parents, two teachers, and an administrator. The administrator is appointed by the principal, and then the two teachers are voted on by the teachers, and then the two parents are voted on by the parents of parents who have kids that go to that school. The site-based council changes should be to go ahead, and what we should do is increase the number of parents to 4, so double it, so the parents outnumber the two teachers and the administrator. Here's why. That site-based council is in charge of like hiring and firing teachers, principals too as well, I believe, but they're in charge of hiring and firing. They're in charge of the curriculum for that school. And they actually have most of the control as far as what goes on in these schools. And so right now, the teachers and the administrators and essentially, the principal is the boss of the teachers, so you don't want to really upset your boss. So basically what you end up with is this hugely lopsided site-based council situation. And so a reformation on that to being for parents would help out a lot. I hear people all the time say, well, we have a hard enough time getting parents involved. Well, one thing is they do hide. There needs to be some requirements to talk about when these site-based council elections take place, notification of that, notification of the process so people know, and a wide variety of changes as far as the site-based councils go. And I think seeing a bill on that, and I believe a bill's been filed or it's getting filed, to take a look at that. It'll take some pushing by us to say, yes, we want it done, but it won't take as much because once again, you don't have, the State Chamber of Commerce doesn't care as much about that. And then, the only party pushing on the other side, of course, would be the teachers unions. But, we generally have, there's about 25, 26 House Republicans, a couple of Senate Republicans that actually have any kind of, that the teachers unions and schools and everything else have a whole lot of control over. You know, you can look at, I believe it's BR 563. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. That was a school choice light bill that passed last year that basically allowed for tax incentive donations into nonprofits that then give means tested scholarships to go to private schools to young kids. It's kind of like a school choice light, allows, you know, a majority minority is how it actually turned out, but lower socioeconomical class kids to go to high-end, nice private schools on scholarships given to them by nonprofits, which are getting a tax incentive from people to donate into. And so you had some people against that. Those are the people that the school still is in charge of. You know, you see Kim King, Killian Timoney's one. There's a couple others. Some people voted against the bill because it didn't affect everybody. I believe Mark Hart voted against BR of, I believe it's 563. Once again, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. And because it didn't apply everywhere, it only applied to 9 counties. And that was kind of what was a compromise met in order to get some of these smaller counties on board. One day we might go into a school choice video and I'll kind of break down why sometimes school choice is a problem in a state like Kentucky getting passed despite the 80% approval for general population for it. So, site-based council change, we might have to push a bit, but hopefully that'll end up getting done. Also as well is BR 106. Of course, that's to end private employer mandates. I won't say the V word because I'm on Facebook Live and they'll pick that up. And so when I say mandates, we all know what we're talking about. And so BR 6 would end private employer mandates. Here's the situation, right? Private employer mandates, BR 106, and I've made some posts about it. I encourage you to push out there and do it. Somebody asked if the OSHA mandate stands, can the state legislature have any way to stop it with state laws? Yes. So first, understand Kentucky is an opt-out state. OSHA, and I got to look into exactly how this works. I've talked to a couple of people about it, but generally speaking, our state has opted to not use OSHA standards. We have our own state standards, as I believe, and somebody can super correct me. So I'm confused on what OSHA's jurisdiction is over our state anyways. But the 10th Amendment situation comes into play. So at least if we ban, like you see Texas and Florida did, employer mandates, it does create a 10th Amendment argument in order to make a stand against things like the OSHA mandate. So yes, if the state legislature does something like BR 106, it would create a 10th Amendment argument in federal court against the OSHA mandates, even if they stand generally, and that could be held out and argued in court, but that law's got to be passed first, and there's a lot of pushback on that. So I'll tell you why BR 106, once again, ending mandates, here's the pushback, and I have to explain what the real reason is. So here's the real pushback. Remember what I said about the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, ran by the corporations. The corporations are getting massive amounts of incentives from the federal government. And also they want to work with the federal government in order to mandate these in place. Sometimes I wrote an article about this too. You can go to andrew4ky.com, go under articles, and you'll see I wrote one kind of where I broke this down. But so basically there's a financial incentive from the federal government to mandate it to your employees and everything else. So there's a federal incentive to put in the mandates. They get massive amounts of money, but also too, it's kind of, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. See, there's so much regulation in place that if I'm doing what you asked me to do, you'll help me out on the regulation. And then that rears its ugly heads here in the state as well. So this is why we've got a issue, that I think that's why we have an issue here in this state. Okay. So the Chamber of Commerce wants to keep it going. That wants employers to be able to do the mandate so they get the financial dollars, right? I think there's also some misplaced beliefs that, hey, if everybody just takes it, we'll get out of this. And I think we've seen that's not the case. You know, if it does anything, it helps with personal outcomes. And for that reason, and it does nothing to, in real world, quote unquote, stop the spread. We've seen that in these studies. So it's clear that this is a personal choice that only affects you personally, and nobody should have any business telling you what they think you should or shouldn't do when it comes to your medical decisions. But anyways, Putting that to the side. And so that's the real reason. But what you'll hear the opponents to BR 106 say is that, well, we don't want to be in the business of telling private businesses what to do. And I agree with you. But here's the problem. We have for decades and decades regulated business. And we've stacked regulation on top of regulation. I'll give you an example. Here in this state, we're one of the few states, but there's a couple of states that have them, a couple of states that don't. One of the few states with certificate of need laws, con laws. And what that is where healthcare providers have to ask the state government for permission to add on beds, buy equipment, build another location, go into a market, add on a department. They pretty much have to ask the state government any questions at all as far as expanding out their ability to operate. Okay. That's just healthcare. And the reason why I bring that up is because we had a situation where we had Dr. Stack coming to a Georgetown hospital that was not mandating it and advertising that, saying you take down those advertisements. And he doesn't even have to say what the threat is because his department, his area, they have a lot of sway, a lot of say-so on whether or not that hospital gets to buy equipment, despite it being a private hospital system. And so for that reason, we've done regulated out the wazoo, to the point where, and Republicans have had control of the state legislature for a few years now, and they haven't deregulated a thing. They've done a terrible job, done a piss poor job of deregulating it, and it's gotten us to a point where we have such an overburdensome regulation that business owners like myself during the lockdowns and everything else, we're losing our licenses and using these apparatuses of control that the state legislature has allowed to languish in our state in order to enforce mandates that they otherwise wouldn't be able to enforce because they don't have a enforcement arm of it. Remember, when I stayed open a year ago, the police refused to enforce it because they're like, look, it's not KRS statute. It's not local statute. It's not our area. This is civil law. Well, if they didn't have the health department to come in and take away my food license, they wouldn't have been able to take me to court at all to stop me from doing anything. Now, I'm not going to sit here and make an argument on whether or not we should have food licensing or not. The point is the government has been regulating business for so long, and it's built up all these apparatuses that we don't have a free market really anymore. What we have is a quasi-government controlled market where they can threaten you with licensing and everything else and certificate of need laws or what have you, or OSHA, and force you to do what they want. And so it's the best solution to a bad situation is just to come out and say, look, we just got to ban it. We just got to end the whole thing because we have failed to do what the Republicans say we're going to do. We're going to deregulate. Look, in a perfectly free market, I don't actually mind if the coffee shop next door starts deciding to mandate to their staff to take a medical treatment because those staff will just quit. They can come work for me when he's got no staff and is trying to mandate his customers have a medical treatment. They'll just come over next door to me, and the free market will punish them for it. The free market actually does. I mean, let's rewind to Jim Crow laws. The only reason why Jim Crow laws had to be put in place was because private business owners were already desegregating because it was more profitable. The free market spoke and said, look, if you're not a racist jerk, we actually reward you. And so that's what they started doing. And then a bunch of racists got a hold of governmental powers and put in place Jim Crow laws in order to force these other companies to do what they said. And so you see the same thing going on where you have people who believe a certain way grabbing control of the levers of government to force their belief on other people. And we have a state legislator that has failed to do anything to take away this power priorly, that is now sitting there and have found this new principle of not telling private businesses what to do right at the time that it's affecting everybody the most. And it's BS. They don't have these principles. If they had those principles, the minute they got into the state legislature, they would have been tearing down this regulation to begin with, but they haven't been doing that. Instead, they've been allowing it to continue on because it's not a real principle. They don't have principles. When's the last time you saw anybody up in the state legislature have principles? There's a few, but not many, but there's a few. But as a whole, they don't have a principle. They care about one thing, staying in power. And they believe to stay in power, they need to manipulate you. And to manipulate you, they need money in their campaign accounts. And they also want to, pull a little off the top for themselves. Enrich themselves a little bit. And what they do is they arrive at a conclusion. They have somebody like the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce come in and say, don't pass a law that ends mandates. We want them. And rather than sitting there and saying, look, I hear you, but that's not our role as government. like they should if they had principle. Instead, they say, okay, that's a conclusion. Let me see how I can twist and turn and somehow create some line of thinking that justifies the conclusion I already to arrive at. They don't look at a solution and say, look, what do my principles say I should do? Instead, they look at something and say, what can I twist in order to make this work? And it's disgusting and it's gross. So we need to push on BR 106. You can go to freedomfight.us/medical freedom, freedomfight.us/medical freedom. That's a relay. Share it out. Please share it with people. That's a relay. It goes to the legislators telling them to pass BR 106. Guys, that will be the fight. It'll be the fight of it might be the fight of our lives. Because truthfully, what we do when it comes to mandates will shape the heart of our Commonwealth and the heart of our country. And if we don't start standing up and fighting on those things, we're going to lose it very quickly. We're going to lose what we very well stand for very quickly. Sorry. Moving on, in the same vein, though, we got BR 384, which prohibits requiring the medical treatments there for students. And so this is mainly for schools and for sports as well. Schools and sports, to ensure that, they don't. Shane Baker is one of the sponsors on this, and he's talking about this the other day, Representative Baker, and he was talking about how he had a concern that, in order to play sports, his kids go to private school, and they're not required, of course, they're not going to be required to take any kind of medical treatment, but they play sports. And when they play sports with public schools. And so in order to try to force beliefs onto other people, the public schools could come in and start trying to mandate that in order to play basketball, football, or what have you, or to play against them, you have to mandate the thing, the put in a mandate for your players, at least, if not the whole school. They might even be able to claim the whole school, but for the players. And so BR 384 would say, nope, you cannot mandate anything for students. And so that's a good, now that bill might move because it doesn't touch on private employers, which means that the Chamber of Commerce will stay out of it because they're not worried about the financial incentives there. Now, the financial incentives going to those school boards, however, and coming down from the federal government there, that will affect it. But once again, that ship has already sailed. See, if the boards did a better job. So for an example, there's like one Republican in the entire state that has an endorsement from a school board. Otherwise, they don't. And so if the the teachers unions. And if the teachers unions weren't so bipartisan, then they could actually have a lot more control, like the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce does, which has control over Democrats and Republicans. But they're so bipartisan that a lot of times for a lot of Republicans, that ship has sailed. Like I said, there's still 25, 26 that they're kind of have some control on. There's a couple in the Senate. And that doesn't mean it's not a fight, but there's not quite the strong opposition that you see there. So BR 384 bans mandating for students to play sports. Okay, so here's two bills that have been filed that will probably, sometimes in legislation, you have a process. Sorry. Sometimes in legislation, you have a process on some bills that take a little bit of time to pass because you got to work it through. You got to slowly kind of target some legislators specifically on these issues to get it through. Things, and this does have success. I'll give you an example. A bill like constitutional carry in our state, that took, I believe, about 5 years to pass. And it took, targeting specific legislators, removing them from office, replacing them. It takes some time, but we were able to get that bill passed. So here's our two bills kind of like that. One is ending taxpayer-funded lobbying. That bill has been filed by Felicia Rayborn. Representative Rayborn filed that. It's BR 1137. That's right. We're already at bill request 1,137. That is how many bills have been filed just so far, at least 1,137. That tells you there's several thousand bills filed like every legislative session. It's almost impossible to keep track of. So BR 1137, what that does is it ends taxpayer-funded lobbying. So I'll give you an example. Here in Lexington, over the last 18 months, well, about a year ago, 18 months, I'd had to look at it. The stat was true about 6 months ago. Over the last 18 months, as of 6 months ago, the city of Lexington had spent $200,000. The government itself, like not even this is taking out some of these quasi-government groups like Kentucky League of Cities. That's taxpayer funded, but also has lobbyists, right? Things like that. Put that to the side. But I'm saying like the city of Lexington, the airport, and like the schools board or whatever, health department, they'd spend over $200,000 paying a private person, private lobbyist, to lobby our state government. So I'll say that again. Cities and government organizations are paying some random private citizen, not random, but a lobbyist that's a private citizen, money to talk to the representatives within that own government. Massive waste of taxpayer dollars. And it's a way of lining the pockets of private individuals while at the same time currying favor them. It's just laundering money. It's laundering your taxpayer dollars into the pockets of private individuals that can then scratch the back of other legislators. And it is ridiculous. It is gross. It is disgusting. And that's BR 1137. It's going to take a little bit of time. You know, we have to move it, get it to move at least to a committee, target the people that are holding it up as it gets to committee. You got to understand how a bill passed. So a bill gets proposed, it goes to LRC, it gets checked, it gets put on the board, and then the basically leadership of the House or Senate can decide to not move the bill forward or not. They can just shelve it and never assign it to a committee, or they can assign it to a committee and then that committee can never have hearings on it. And then that committee could have hearings on it and then never have a vote on it to move forward to the House floor. If they do have a vote to move forward to the House floor, the House can just turn around then, and then the Speaker of the House can just never put it on the schedule to even be voted on. And then that individuals, if it's never put on to be voted on, even if it does pass, then it goes to the Senate. It's got to repeat the same exact thing. And if it never gets put on the schedule to be voted on, it never passes, right? That's why only the cruddiest legislation passes, because it's horrible, it's awful, and you got to get a couple of 4 or 5 key people to really get behind it. And those 4 or 5 key people have gotten to where they are because they've been lining their pockets and financially incentivized forever to not do the right thing. And then they, of course, justify that they're helping people because nobody wants to be the villain in their own story. And so taxpayer-funded lobbying is one of those bills that will take a lot of time, a lot of targeting in order to get passed, probably 5 years, I would say. But it's something, and it's a process, and it's worth pushing for because it's worth doing. Allowing the city of Louisville spends hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on this. Other bill we got was Defend the Guard bill. This bill was also filed last year. I think Southworth had it last year. Mark Hart has it this year. And what that bill does is it says that our National Guard cannot be deployed out of the state without a formal declaration of war from Congress. And so basically what that means is like when Pelosi called up the National Guard to go up to DC, or right now we've got a couple hundred soldiers training in, I believe, Texas to go on a deployment to Africa with peacekeeping. And so those types of things where our National Guard is being used outside of Kentucky would stop. And so basically it would say, look, National Guard, disaster relief, everything else, protecting our state. But if there's not a formal declaration of war, our governments, our soldiers would not be deployed. Some people don't like that bill. I personally like that bill. I like the idea of saying our National Guard is our state's protection. Our National Guard is for helping the state out mainly. If there is a formal declaration of war, our National Guard needs to get deployed, then they have the ability to do that. But if Congress, if these whole missions that the president's just using our Guard like a slush fund, not following the Constitution at all, I think it's very fair of us to say we don't want to take part in that at all. Let's Defend Our Guard bill. It's not that there's particularly a lot of opposition per se. Of course, the military contractors would have some opinions on it, but it's just something that's not high on a lot of people's radar. And so that might be something we need to push a little bit to start seeing where everybody falls on it. Thank you guys for joining me. Once again, go to andrew4ky.com and feel free to donate. Additionally, as well, share this with your friends or family, everything else. This is available as a podcast too as well. I'll be uploading it here soon. And I thank you guys so much for joining us. And I will come out with another video probably again before the beginning of session. Then when session starts, we'll have some videos a lot more often. Thank you guys so much.